Please be ordered. You stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for the nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Well,
Mayor Mueller,
here.
Councilmembers Udvig, Garrett Bauer,
Here.
Redcliffe, Jared Robinson,
Here. All right, with that, we'll entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion? Motion, Mayor. Motion by Councilmember Robinson. Do we have a second?
second.
Second by Councilmember Udvig. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we will entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Motion by Councilmember Robinson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, any discussion? All right, with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First meeting open to the public. Do we have anybody that would like to? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Item A, assessing services update. Eric.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. So, my name is Eric Stoltz. I'm the assessor here that's been working for you now for, I want to say it's 6 or 7 years and lost track of time here, but, so I'm here as well. I have Chris Larson as well. Maybe you've seen Chris. He does a lot of residential for me in the city as well. And Mary Wells is running a few minutes behind, but she's also on the contract, and she helps a lot with, the newsletter and other sort of things like that kind of help with us. So in general, that's sort of our assessing team here, but, why don't we start with, I guess, the second slide, which maybe I already put the parts of that. I apologize. So we'll go to the next slide. And we have, first of all, here we have, just for those that aren't super familiar, this is the assessment timeline and valuation timeline. So right now, I'm in the process of setting values for the year. We're not quite locked down, but it's pretty close. So when people start thinking of their value and their taxes, it's pretty easy to describe Minnesota as probably one of the most complicated property tax systems that's out there. And every time there's a fix proposed, instead of fixing, they just add another layer, to deal with something. So we tried to summarize as best we could, but right now, to set your value, if you look back at the top here, it says 20% of the properties are viewed in the spring and summer of 2023. So by statute, we have to view every property every 5 years. That doesn't mean we have to go in every one, but we have to set foot on it or be out there once every 5 years. So in the spring and the summertime, we're out there looking at, taking what we call a quintile, but 20% of the properties in the city at any given time. So some years it's, half of the section because there's a lot of houses in some of the older part of town here. And other times we're doing, the west half of St. Francis is just 1 year because there's a lot less improvements out there and a lot less parcels. But in general, we're going to be out there once every 5 years. What happens then is when we're looking at this study to set these values, we look at a 12-month period. So sales study, it's not quite the same as the calendar year, but it's October of 2022 through September of 2023. And so that gives a few months to kind of get the last of the sales in and for us to process them and look at them before we set the values. And then we're looking to set your value every year. When you get your notification, it's what that value would have been January 2nd of that year. So January 2nd, 2024 is what you're going to see here coming up on your notice that you get mailed in March. And so the tax statements and the valuation notices are sent together, usually in the same envelope, which also gets nice and confusing. But one of them usually has a color on it, and that's the one with your valuation, and the other is actually your tax bill. That's going to show what your value was the prior year and then what your taxes are going to be this year. So if there's ever questions or whatnot, they have answers on there, but I always encourage people to give us a call. Got our number on there. It also has those on the tax statements as well, and the valuation notices. And because the city of St. Francis, there's not a local board of appeal where people can come and appeal to the council or to another board. It's set up for them to appeal to us, to talk to us, or they can come into the county government center in Anoka on those dates, May 7th and May 8th as well, to do that. And if for some reason people talk to us and they just say, we don't agree with you, we want to appeal, then they can also appeal to county level staff. The county assessor will assign somebody to kind of look it over and give a second opinion. And then the final level of appeal on that is the Anoka County Board of Appeal, listed on June 17th at 6 p.m. And that would be kind of your final level to go and appeal to it's not the county board, it's a special board that they appoint of real estate professionals, appraisers, realtors, things like that. And then they will do the same thing. If you provide data and information to them, they'll consider your appeal. Oftentimes they'll one or two properties that they can go out and visit themselves and look at all that. So there's a lot of appeal options for folks in there. But in general, that's kind of the timeline and how it works. So again, it gets kind of confusing because you're paying your taxes, it'll say 2024, but that's actually based on your value you set in 23 that you pay on the following year. So how estimated market values for tax allocation purposes are determined. So as I kind of mentioned before, the 2024 values are based on qualified sales that took place October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. And generally qualified, what that means is, if you see the next line, there's 130 residential sales that occurred, 77 of them were qualified. Sorry, go back to the next slide. On the line to it. And what that means is, so those ones that are not qualified sales, they're not open arm's length transactions. So for example, if you sell it to one of your children, or if it's an estate sale and somebody passes away and, personal representatives are dealing with it. Or, there's not as many of them now, but when foreclosures and short sales and things are happening, those were all different motivations to sell. And so while they may be values, they're not the open arm's length ones that we look at to determine what's going on in the market. So for this year, we had 77 qualified sales of residential out of the CIA, commercial industrial apartment sales, one of which was qualified. I think that was probably the bowling alley on that one. And so those other ones, maybe because there's extra personal property or a lot of business value intertwined in those values. But we always try to call and talk to people, kind of generally get a feel for what's going on. The ratios are calculated by dividing the prior year's EMV, which is your estimated market value, by the adjusted sale price, and then you get a ratio. So something sells for $100,000 and we had $90,000 on it, that would give you a ratio of 90%. And so our current values are adjusted to meet Department of Revenue criteria. And so our median ratio in each classification in each jurisdiction, so residential in the city of St. Francis, would need to be between 90 and 105%. If we have at least 6 sales in any category, this Department of Revenue looks at this as its own independent unit. So I'll just take the example of Bethel, small town Bethel. Some years they might have 6, some years they might not. And if they don't, they're kind of thrown in with, the county as a whole, or sometimes with St. Francis. So that's generally how it works. And in the city of St. Francis, because we have a lot of sales to work with, we'll have it divided out based on kind of neighborhoods and types: water, non-water, new, older, rural, large acreages, small. Not all years do we get the all the sales we need, but in generally there's pretty good data out there to see what's going on in the city. Next slide, please. So overall, estimated market values of real estate in St. Francis were at 1,064,778,600. Or up 6.7%. And I will just caution, this is all preliminary because this was all pulled a week ago. And some things were still moving up and down, but kind of give you a general idea. So residential, most neighborhoods really had minimal changes. There's some where they went up 1% or 2%, some where they went down 1% or 2%. But in general, what happened was to create that 6.7%. Townhouses were still quite strong, as well as larger acreage rural stuff. That's stuff I've noticed, and not just in St. Francis, but elsewhere. If you have 20, 30, 40 acres, the land values are still being pretty strong on those bigger pieces. And so that all kind of accounted for that change. Generally, apartments were pretty flat. Commercial properties, they went up a little bit. Kind of again depends on the type of property. A service garage versus a gas station are going to do a little bit different. But then industrial properties, if you recall last year, there was a lot of very strong increases in, shops, warehouses, manufacturing, mini storages. And so it's not as extreme this year, but that still continues to be a strong market. So those are, that median is about 13%. But we're seeing changes in the 10 to 20% range on those yet again. And so all of this is, I'll let you know, is very similar to what's been going on in the rest of the county. The county in general, it will kind of move in mass, but then there's differences. I always try to look at, if we don't have a lot of sales, we look at sort of, I'd say, the more rural or the northern part of the county, different than the southern part of the county. So, all the apartment sales are 90% are in Fridley, Columbia Heights. We try to look at things a little bit differently, what's going on in St. Francis, East Bethel, and Hand Lake, and now then, and stuff like that. So just be aware, and everybody should know that just because there's things happening in other parts of the county doesn't necessarily mean that's how we're going to do it. The county will help set rates, and then it's our job as the assessors to start to calibrate those and make it work for every jurisdiction based on what we're seeing out there. And so this is just kind of a few years, if you look back, chart of the citywide value over time. So, I referenced that $1 billion number. If you look back even 3 years prior, you'll see how much different it is and how much that increased overall. And a lot of that is, most of it is residential and land that you value in St. Francis. And so you can see, remember, if you think back to 21, 22, how things were going up 27, 28, 30% on houses. They were really crazy. And then between 22 and 23, it was a little increase, but it was pretty mild. And, I'll say one of the interesting things that happened in that cycle is you started to see later in the cycle, the interest rates were changing and how that kind of cooled a lot of the residential market. And in some places that meant things were kind of flat. And if you went to the newer developments, I kind of started to separate that whole neighborhood that's being built north of the high school that's been around for a little while, and where there's a lot of new properties and a lot of new development. That actually saw a decrease last year, I think of maybe 8 or 10%, because there's so much of it's dependent on, construction costs and what the loan price is. And the same house you could get at 3% is a lot different when you could get it at 7%. So that had a bigger impact on those neighborhoods. But in general, things are, steadily increasing. A lot of it, some of it's new construction. Values of land are still doing well, but in general, things have gotten back a little bit more to normal here the last year or so. Slide. And then I just kind of broke it out one other way as well. So you look between last year and this year, non-water, single family was pretty flat. Waterfront was down roughly 1%. You said townhouses were up pretty strong at 7%, commercial 2%, industrial 13%, and apartments at roughly 0%. And so just the one last thing, it's kind of nice that we're doing this right now because I have a pretty good idea where things are at. But because you don't have a local board of appeal that I would come to in April or May, just to let people know your statements are going to come in March with your tax statement as well from the prior year. And so if you have any questions, please reach out to me. That's my phone number as well as my email. I'm the primary contact for St. Francis. And I will come and I'll talk to you, try to explain it. Come out and visit your property if you would like me to look at it and verify the information as well. And so also, if it works for you, you can go down to the Anoka County Courthouse Government Center in May. And the one positive, I'd say one of the positives about not having a local board of appeal is when people have say they missed the deadline, so you had your appeal meeting on April 15th. Well, after that, they can't change it, I can't change it anymore. What happens is people can appeal that up until that June County Board of Appeal meeting. So if people think, oh, I missed this date, May 8th, let them know that they can still call me. We still have over a month to look at their values and adjust them if they decide, if we decide something needs to change. So with that, I guess that's generally the presentation. I want to know if you had any questions or comments or concerns regarding the assessment.
Kevin, want to start with you with questions?
Sure, do you see any trends where it'll actually level off and not go up every year? Granted, government raises money to do things for the cities and towns and whatnot, but again, we see it go up and up and up. Does it ever level off? And have you, I mean, we're not seeing it in the traffic, of course, but.
Yeah, well, I would say in general, yes, it's just not always everywhere all the time exactly the same. So in general, when people get their valuation notices on residential this year, they're gonna see, most people are gonna see pretty flat. Some might, like I said, some might see down a little bit, some might see up $1,000. It's gonna be pretty flat. But part of it is there's new construction, which is always adding value to the city. That's part of the changes. And then some of the commercial properties, and like I said, townhouses have still been strong, so those can still continue to go up and up. So the answer is we follow whatever the market's telling us to. So I started doing this in 2006 when things were really strong for about 2 years. And then, 3 or 4 years of lots of unhappy people calling when we were following the market. But if you remember the slide on there, we're always looking at a year of sales that happened prior. So 15 to 3 months prior to when we're setting the value. So I would say a normal market where things are increasing, our values are always going to be a little bit behind, right? So we're always going to be a little lower. What happens when you get a market like now where it's kind of leveled out and a few places tipped a little, or in the 2008-9 range, we would be higher and we would start to go down and down. So we've had a lot of people the last couple of years, because their values have gone up and their taxes have gone up, speak to me and say, hey, my taxes are crazy, they've never been this high. And I would say now, that's probably the case, but even 2-3 years ago, a lot of people, when we would look back at what the taxes were in 2008, they were actually higher than they were for the next 7 or 8 years after that. So things are always shifting around too, because if the residential values decrease and the commercial industrial values stay strong, or the agricultural values stay strong, the tax burden is going to shift over to those other properties because they're taking up a bigger percentage of the value in the city. So the taxes and the value are always two really confusing things for people to kind of get their head around what's going on at any given time. But our job as the assessor is to set the valuation as well as the classifications for what it's being utilized for. And then the taxes are going to be, basically whatever your budget, the school district budget, and the county, those are the primary people. And so whatever those are set at, it's going to be divvied up amongst things. And so you'll see, you've been seeing some of these shifts, especially to now commercial industrial properties. I don't know if your TNT meeting when you had it in November, if it was just residential or if there was a commercial industrial. I had a lot of calls from those folks where taxes went up 50% because their values of their business might have went up 30% or 35% on top of any increases. I know county had an increase in their valuation, in their levy this last year, I think probably 15%. So that was there on top of anything we would have done in the city as well. So it was kind of a double whammy for a lot of those places, but we'll always follow what the market is, and then whatever the local government decides their budget is how that gets divvied up.
Are you seeing where, again, where businesses are actually, like, let's say an apartment building or a commercial building has gone backwards? That also factors into what you're doing as well. I mean, you're basing your research on sales, and so the price has gone down on the building, say $50,000. That gets reflected as well. But does it? I don't know how to say it right, but does it get lost with other? I'm trying to formulate the right question. You're using, say, past sales. You use sales from other. I guess how far is your range? Do you go outside of St. Francis when you're looking at some, say, a commercial entity?
Sure. So yeah, the next level legally how we have to do it is if there's not enough sales in St. Francis, it would be countywide. So the Anoka County in general would have to meet that same criteria. And so what happens is you know, the Anoka County then would have to be between that 90 and 105% on all commercial properties. And so what we'll do, and the other assessors in the county will do, is work with Anoka County and say, all right, if you decide, you know, to get to that level, you're going up 10% to stay on any type of property. And then I look at that and say, you know, that's pretty strong for here. You know, can we dial it down a little bit for St. Francis and some of these other areas? They're pretty receptive to that. That happened last year, I know, in some of the stuff I would call the storage warehouse. But if you think of like more your shop industrial style buildings, I actually had them go in and reduce it another 20% from where they were gonna put it, because there were sales in the rural part of the county, but a lot of the sales were, you know, Blaine and Fridley and Lionel, all these areas more to the south, and it was a different market. So even, so then they looked at it and said, okay, they're gonna adjust everybody's, but these other sales up in these areas, we see where you're giving us, and there's some good data that you're proving. And so we'll calculate that. So in the end, maybe those areas to the south will go up a little more. These ones wouldn't go up quite as much, and then in the end it'll balance out. And so that's part of the job of us is to try to work with the county to do that. But when you get to the more unique, you know, industrial waterfront properties are another one, you might not have very many that sell along the river, then they're gonna look out a little bit. Just to see, right?
Our new construction is down considerably, brand new, you know, from the ground up construction is down considerably from the last 2 years. Again, probably due to the interest rates being, you know, from 5 to 7%. But, do you see trends like 05 and 08, 2005, 2008? Do you see trends again where any of those numbers are graphed where values are gonna drop considerably? And again, it's a lead lag. It takes several years for our taxes to adjust. Again, government still has to supply services and goods and whatnot. But do you see bad times coming? I guess I should say.
You know, it's always hard to predict, but I will tell you what I remember from that time and versus now. It seems like there's not as much, there wasn't as much, I would say, spec building. You know, I remember when I first started, I was working in city of Rice, you know, where that is up Highway 10, right? And it was a whole big neighborhood that they were just building, right? And nobody was gonna buy it yet. At some point, you got to a situation where the builder was in trouble, but you know, that hasn't been going on as much. You know, yours is a great example actually of, is it Riverview? Is that the name of the particular neighborhood? But you know, they'll plat 10, 12, 15 lots. I mean, they'll do that and wait for that, and then they'll do another chunk. And so there's a little more caution. And so what I've noticed, like I said, in that particular neighborhood, I did see things go down, but then they came back this year. You know, their demand was stronger and the supply wasn't so large that it created this kind of cavern for things to fall in. So right now it looks like things have kind of cooled, but they've leveled for the most part. Other than, like I said, land still seems to be pretty strong for the larger pieces, and that's just because it's harder and harder to find 20 or 30 or 40 acres to build on. But even with the rates that increase, things seem to be kind of flattening. So I'm hopeful it doesn't happen again. It feels different than it did the last time, but I guess time will tell. Okay, and then the last question, we had a concerned citizen several meetings back saying that St. Francis might have had a smudge on it for what we are, what we have available, etc. They actually mentioned the fact that we had a couple of retail entities here, Dollar General, of course. Is St. Francis treated any different in the county's eyes as far as, and it was a good question they had. Are we treating any different because we have some manufactured homes, we have some regular homes, and we have a limited commercial entity, but is St. Francis looked at any different than other cities around county? No, I would say the only way it's different is if you're based on what sales happen in St. Francis. So St. Francis is big enough where it's got its, you know, its own market, kind of the things that are happening. And so it's not viewed or done anything differently than anywhere else. The best I try to do is it's harder when I get to commercial industrial because there's just not as much of it. Right. But usually I would say the only thing I would add to that is you're going to look at that in terms of a little bit broader. You know, like I said, I'm going to look at sales that are happening in Rome and Bethel and Now Then and things like that. And so now I wouldn't say anything differently just because of that, because in the end of the day, our values have to be reflective of what people are paying for properties. And so that's kind of where the county and then the state come in and say, are you near where the sale prices are being? And so one little anecdote I will give you, I remember this has been a few years ago now, but in just to the south of here in the city of Now Then, which I also work in, it's split into 3 different school districts. And I would get a little bit for a while where people would, I would see prices be a little bit different because one county, or one of them had approved a levy and another one hadn't. And, you know, the same house might be $2,000 different in taxes because of that. But that's really an economic thing. That's people working the numbers and looking at it and saying, okay, what am I gonna pay based on where it's at? And what the prices are. So that's really the only thing I would say is any different. It's just if there's something reflected in the sales, it will be reflected in our submitted market values. But otherwise, everything else is viewed kind of all by itself in the city of St. Francis.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Crystal?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Well, I don't have any questions there.
I have any questions.
I guess I was just kind of curious how residential kind of stays more flat and that's where commercial and industrials tend to be very different from each other. I mean, I'm not a real estate person, I'm not a builder, you know, so I'm curious as to how those can be affected so different.
You know, I think it comes down to the whole supply and demand thing, the best I can reflect, because it's interesting. So the whole, I would just call it industrial properties, right? For a long time, those were pretty flat. There wasn't a lot of change going on, maybe a little bit here or there. Everything else was doing its, you know, residential was doing its ups and downs and all that. Up till a couple years ago. And then all of a sudden, things just went nuts. And that's when we were getting these 30% increases year over year for a couple of years. And now it's, you know, down to 13 on average, which is still a pretty good amount. But when I've asked people a different, you know, between real estate folks and other people, when I call on their sales, it's just the market in the industrial world is causing them to need space. And so I think part of it is just the demand for a lot of American-made stuff. I've heard this from a lot of people who are saying, you know, before it wasn't as big of a deal, a lot more stuff we want to do here, so now we have more work, more clients, more whatever, I need space. And the cost to construct has gone up a lot. So I know people that have said, well, you know, I was gonna build something, but can't afford that now, so I guess I'll find what I can find. And yeah, I probably overpaid, but I needed something. And so that's been a story I've heard over and over and over again. So the industrial world is affected more by just the general, you know, world of what's going on as far as their businesses and the economy. And so that's just their real estate prices have been reflecting that. And that's why you see, you know, commercial is a little bit different because, you know, a gas station demand is going to be different than an office building, which maybe dropped, and all, you know, all those things vary. But in that industrial world, it's still been very strong, and there's, you know, the cost to build that stuff has gone so high that even some of these existing buildings that, you know, you look at, you know, it's 50 years old, needs a bunch of work, you know, will sell for, it wasn't unheard of last year when I was setting values for me to be at half of what something would sell for. And so that's kind of starting to correct itself again, and I'm hopeful after here, a couple of years of that, that's going to also level up a little bit, but we'll see.
And you mentioned too, after the truth and taxation meeting that we had, which was probably my most eventful one being here for the time that I've been serving. It was interesting, but I'm glad some people did reach out to you, and then hopefully they got whatever corrected or help them out a little bit. That was interesting to me. But one thing I'd like to throw out, I guess, to staff as a suggestion would be having this information, the contact information on the last page. I don't know how easy it would be. And again, it's an idea right now. They'll obviously get back to us just for the public. If we have like a tab of some sort where it's just super easy to get to for them to contact there, I think too with that might help us too when it comes to our truth and taxation meeting later on, you know, in the year. Things like that. I think it's a lot of it is, I think, on people too. You know, again, I've said it many times where I wasn't paying attention to anything, right? I just go to work, pay my bills, ignore everything that's going on around me for many years until I got involved. So a lot of that is on our residents or business owners and stuff too. But we did have several businesses talk about how much their taxes did increase, and obviously they weren't happy. We want to see more development here. You know, be pro-business and all that too, I think. So those things obviously affect whether or not they can stay or make it, depending on how their business is. So that's all I have. Anything else? Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to, we have to. Item B, update city code chapter 2, administration first reading ordinance 328, amendment chapter 65, departments.
Mayor and council, before you tonight is a housekeeping step for our chapter 2 administration. Within our city code, we have set several of the departments outlined in regards to their structure. As you can see on the last updates, many of them were 2011, 2006, and there are several changes that have happened in the last almost 20 years. Along with some cleanup with public works, so they had not only public works in there, but they had it as 2 separate departments in itself. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Question, Sarah.
Go through all this again.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah, it's a lot of redundant stuff was pulled out and easier words put in, so looks good.
Question.
And Kevin.
No questions, sir.
I have no questions. Well, again, it's a housekeeping issue, cleaning up things that are probably overdue. So with that, would entertain a motion, to approve the updated city code chapter 2 administration first reading ordinance 328. I'll make that motion. Motion by Councilmember Bauer. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Hudvig, and it's a roll call. Given this ordinance.
Mayor Muellbauer,
Aye.
Councilmembers Freckles, Bauer,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Hedwig,
Aye.
Carries. And we'll have our second meeting open to the public. Do we have anything that wants to talk? All right, reports. Item A, Public Works Annual Report 2022.
The Mayor and Council, before you tonight is the Public Works Annual Report Review. It's fairly extensive, so I'm going to run through some highlights, make it a little quicker this evening. Some of the Public Works highlights for 2023 were the completion of the Delwood Riverbank Stabilization Project. A couple other things we did, we're preparing the 4020 building to become a new temporary fire station. It was successful at that, and I think it's been going pretty well so far. We continue to modify things as we need to. One of the things staff did this year was work with the Stanford Township. We were successful with the road agreement and completed our first project together in 23. This was a step in the right direction. We also worked with ISD 15, Anoka County, and the ACD on the swale on Rum River Boulevard, which is right next to the high school. That was also completed this year, and it was a great venture to work with our neighbors. Public Works applied and obtained $173,000 in grants this year. It was something that we wanted to try. We were successful at it. Because we were successful at it, we're back doing it again, and I'm going to continue doing it. We also had our first Public Works annual open house. That also seemed very successful, and we already have the 24 date set for October 29th, which is another Tuesday. So just to fill council in, the rides were given last week. The snowplow rides were given. We were trying to wait for snow. Of course, we give the rides and then it snows. I would like to thank the 2 students were both from the St. Francis Elementary, and they were really helpful, and it was great working with them. In fact, one of the entire classes came out for one of the children that got to ride in the snowplow truck. So it was very successful. We'll be doing it again. Some recycled statistics this year. It was the first year that we held all the events on Public Works. It saved a fair amount of money, and we actually had 598 vehicles come through, up from, I think it was 539 in 2022. So we're steadily increasing. A big addition this year was in 23 was the oil recycle bin. It's been extremely popular. We also collected about 15% more appliances. And because of that last year, we applied for and received grant money to fund a enclosed recycle trailer. And I think council will probably see that on National Night Out. We can use it for events. It's a very unique trailer. It was fully funded by a grant. It didn't cost the residents anything here. And we can use it for whatever we want, as long as we're always promoting our recycle program here at St. Francis. Stormwater and increasingly, there's MS4 permit is constantly progressing. MPCA is constantly pushing us in that direction. So this year in stormwater, in 23, we've been working on the project planning for the upcoming rain garden project on the 227,000. And here in 24, you'll see that project start this year. Staff conducted 65 site inspections, including the City Hall Fire Station. We had 95 hours in street sweeping in the spring and 71 in the fall. That's also something we're going to be looking at, working with the Ram River watershed this year. Hopefully we get some help with that. I'm happy to report that we're up to date on our permit rate requirements. However, as they increase, we have to continue to upgrade our program. Have a report every 3 years. We're required to do lead and copper samples, 20 random samples in the city. We were under all of the requirements, so that's always good to hear. The 2023 drought last year, which is crazy because if we remember 23, we had extreme flooding and never seen the Rum River ever that high in the spring, and we had record lows in the fall. It's really a hard year to wrap your head around. Especially from public works standpoint, because it's one extreme to the other. But it was a very interesting year. MDH last year, Department of Health conducted a sanitary inspection of our water treatment plant. They found no deficiencies or violations, and it is because of our maintenance programs here. Parrish and his group do an amazing job staying in front of it, and it's much appreciated. Another thing that we've done is an asset management program. We've started that. I think, we had talked about that earlier this year. We started it in 22 by using Diamond Maps. It's the water lines, sewer lines, hydrant valves, curb stops, manholes, and we can locate everything in the city now within an inch. That program is complete. We're actually starting the actual stormwater lines. One other thing that on the water side, the water software program we use is the Neptune 360. We've taken that now and we're using the specialized part of it and watching actual water usage. We can really dial it in. And so what we're doing is, if there's a outlier of some type, we've been taking small amounts of our residents and tracking them and seeing if they're using water, weird times and extreme amounts. It's working out very well. The most common cause of overwater usage in the city is leaky toilets. And we can detect that. It doesn't say toilet on it, but just the way it's very, very common number.
That he used throughout the night.
Yeah, exactly. So besides saving our natural resource, we'd like to think that we're also saving residents some money on the water bills. I know that's different coming from Public Works, but it seems to be working for us. We're here for them. Some fun statistics this year. Last year was 90.3 inches of snow. That's a lot of snow. We used 507 tons of salt on our asphalt roads and 47 tons of chips on our gravel. We didn't go down the gravels quite as much, but we spent a lot of time on the gravels last year. We're trying to concentrate on both a little bit more now, spending a little bit more time on the gravels as well. $43,000 in repairs. Hopefully that's the most I'll see in the small amount of equipment we have. That was a lot of money in repairs. One of the most interesting things about the spring of 23 was the road washout on 245th. I was really impressed with the team. We had it repaired in under 8 hours. It was a lot of fun to watch them in an emergency to see how they acted, and along with the fire department. And it was a joy. It was what we'd expect the Public Works team to do. So I was quite proud of them. There were 187 events held in our parks. One of the things that the Public Works, one of the side projects, because of the dry winter, the opposite of 222, was the corner of 227 and Ambassador, cleaned that up and turned out wonderful. It looks very, very nice. They also worked on some drainage issues at the wastewater treatment plant that was left over. We've got that corrected now, so we won't have any more troubles down there for drainage. They did some culvert cleaning on 238, and they've traded in their shovels late in 23 for scrub brushes, because we've had no, completely the opposite. And they have been cleaning. It's unbelievable how they've cleaned up our facility, and they continue to clean up the parks and whatever projects that we can find as we're moving along. With that, I can answer any question.
Questions, Crystal?
I don't have any questions. I will say that you guys are doing a remarkable job. It has been unique between our snow and our droughts and everything else that's been going on. I look forward to the next open house. It's fun.
Thank you.
Rob? I don't have any questions. Great report. I'm intrigued on what next year is gonna look like, you know, as far as drought and, you know, with our little 7 inches of snow that we've had so far this year. But there is a drastic change based on what we looked at in this report versus what what we're seeing already. But good report. Sarah?
That's an excellent report. It's always good to see your crew out working and you're always chatting with somebody, which I love seeing. I love seeing the public feeling comfortable enough with them to just go up and say, hey, what are you doing out here today? It's really good stuff. Give them our appreciation.
Thank you.
Kim?
Great report. That corner does look fantastic. That park property, the future park property is, look really nice. The way the limbs are up and the brush was cleaned up, and they did a really nice job there. It looks good. How was the response to the last recycle event? You had the oil and appliances only for a Saturday for a window of time.
Yeah, we had it open for a window of time where they can come through. We can allow them to. It was, I think because it was new, it was a little slow.
Okay.
And I think the more we do that, the better.
And the weather was good, like it is now, or?
Yep, the weather was good.
Okay. Also, with salt and gravel not being used as much yet, and we still have end of February, March to go. What happens to the strip level, the stuff we have on hand, and is your budget gonna show that you'll have some?
It will, and the wonderful thing about salt, it doesn't degrade. So what we have just sits until we need it again.
You don't have to turn it or roll it over?
We'll probably roll it once or twice, but, and the only time we do that is when it gets really humid. That will actually.
That'll be a free buy, how do you, what you need next year when we don't know what the weather?
I knew that.
Roll the dice.
I wouldn't be.
There you go. And then lastly, stormwater, we had to raise rates, it's been $60 for the longest time. And it's always a thorn in the public side, including mine, I write the same check as everybody else does. It's $60, I believe it's $72. Again, how much labor, do you have a labor quote for what you spend on stormwater stuff when you're measuring silts and ditches and looking at stormwater stuff? Do you have a labor quote that can track what you're spending now, what you say? Like you said, they burn you every year with more crap, and I'm gonna say it's crap.
In
They
fact,
burn you with more stuff.
right, right.
Well, really,
Yep, in the report, we actually had her give examples underneath stormwater of what we were doing, and yes, we actually do track all that. And I can actually get that for you, I have numbers.
and it'd be nice to know, yeah, you know the percentage that each year, so you're burdened with more. And when this was instituted a decade and a half ago or longer, again, another government state mandate, or unfunded, they give you nothing for it, which would be our tax money again anyway, taken from another pocket, left for the right pocket. Sure. But, and they tell you that each city's gotta do it, and we're not alone in doing it, each city has to do it. And again, we're in a partial rural area, in a partial city area, we have more curb and gutter, and say our neighbors go Grove and whatnot, but they gotta do the same thing, they've gotta measure silt ponds and parking areas, and it's a burden on the public works department, which then reverberates back to the city budget, so. I think it was worth bringing up, and we're gonna get the same phone calls and concerns, and I'm gonna write a new check this year like everyone else again. But the money, we do have a designated fund for what the stormwater produces, and like some of the repairs we talked about, you negotiate with our neighbors. And some of the culverts and stuff you had in place, that money doesn't come out of the general budget, it goes to it comes out of the stormwater fund. because we have it there to use, so. We're putting it in a different box to be used another time. I would like to let a future meeting, if you could share us and maybe give us a graph if it's gone up, and then maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's gone down and you're more efficient, so you're doing the same amount of work and maybe less time, but maybe the regulations or how the book was this thick, now it's this thick or something like that. That's all I have. Great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Great report, all the departments there, parks and streets and stormwater. Appreciate the acknowledgement to Steve, that was good to read too, made me smile. Do we have any, given MS4 is probably one of our biggest complaints of, everything that we do here at the city from our residents, do we have any major projects coming up, this year that you can share with us or not this time?
Sure. Well, the rain gardens are one of them. That's stormwater. The major one that was last year was the Delwood. And then anything to do with culverts, so we're gonna be doing culvert replacing this year. I've also applied for grants to help us with that, along with the stormwater funds. So, I can't guarantee grants, but we're going to have to continue to do work on the culverts, particular to the west of 47.
But I love to see the grant thing, again, given the government doesn't have money, it's all taxpayer funded one way or another, to get some of that back in grant form or whatever form. It's always a positive, I think, too, you know, when you can qualify for it, so. I know a lot of people that pay that MS4 claim that, you know, where's the money going, nothing's being done. Again, they may not see it if they don't frequent over the Delwood area, but some of those things too that, are getting done, you know, or there are a few communities that have benefited that are aware of it, but very few, so I do appreciate that. Again, you share it, do have meetings, so if people pay attention, I think we'll do a little better, but again, nobody wants to pay an extra fee anytime. But thank everybody to the public works. We all appreciate that. With that, we'll move on to item B, police department, and we'll report.
Mayor Council, in your packets, you'll see the 2023 annual report for the police department. The summer of 2023, it was a year of some challenges once again. We're trying to get back to the full staff. We are very hopeful that our current officer in training will successfully complete his field training by June or so, and get us back to a full roster. Despite being shorthanded, again, our staff was pulled together, they supported one another, and it was just business as usual. They served this community at a very high level despite being shorthanded. In this report, like previous reports, we really try to focus on department staff and their service to this community, some of the roles they play and how they contribute to the department. And these are the people that do their job day in and day out, providing law enforcement services to the city and who continue to make the department what it is. And all of our staff members are mentioned toward the beginning of the report, with each one of them bringing unique qualities to this department. We recognize our administration on page 6, which includes our department sergeants, beginning with Sergeant Larson, who is involved with just about everything the department has to offer, and wears many hats in the department. Also Sergeant Stemme, who was recently promoted to his new position in July of 2023. He's doing a great job in the new role, and his 18 years of experience with St. Francis is definitely contributing to that. We also recognize our administrative assistant, Lori Roberts, who is sadly set to retire in October of this year, and has just been vital to this department since 2008, when she began. Lori works alongside records clerk Sandy Hom, and together they perform many tasks, and I'm not going to name them all here, even that I put in this report, but just everything from entering into the RMS system, providing assistance to the public, providing all of our data we need for our reportings, et cetera. So this department really couldn't function without what them two do, and just don't want to stress the importance of their positions. On page 7, our patrol staff is listed and is obviously the most visible part of our department. Our officers work 10 or 12-hour shifts, and we're involved with approximately 6,700 incidents in 2023, and which was a slight increase over that of the previous year. In addition to enforcing laws and responding to calls, a large portion of our patrol staff is involved in some fashion with our community outreach efforts, and the amount of officers that contribute to our community outreach efforts and perform tasks which are really outside of what's expected of them is just outstanding, and it's I think what I really feel that sets us apart from some other departments. You can also see an officer spot in that report with no picture in it. We do hope to fill this spot with our new officer in training again, Officer Human. after he successfully completes his field training, and again, we hope that, we always set a full Pioneer Days to be back to full staff, so hopefully this year is the year. Along with our patrol staff, we also want to recognize our 2 chaplains who provide such an incredible service to our citizens and our officers when they need it. Our 5 reserve officers are highlighted as well on page 7, which is soon to be 6, as we're currently in the onboarding process of another one. Our reserve officers continue to volunteer their time to assist this department and serve this community. They put a ton of hours in each year, and just assist with things like house checks, park patrols, traffic control at events, assisting at community events, and really just assisting officers on shift with transports or anything else they might need, directing traffic at accidents and things like that. So they're an asset to our department, they're an asset to our officers, and we truly respect them for all the volunteer hours they put in, which was over 700 hours of service combined in 2023. The department investigator was busy in 2023, being assigned 131 cases to investigate, which is up from 107 the previous year. As mentioned in the report, a standout case from last year, which actually began in late 2022, was a burglary at a residence. This investigation continued for several months, where the suspect was ultimately charged and convicted of the burglary and is now serving multiple years in prison. This type of work for the investigator is really in addition to other duties, including writing and certain search warrants, filing criminal complaints, conducting background investigations, overseeing our forfeiture process and alcohol, tobacco compliance checks, and managing our evidence. Our annual statistics are displayed on the next few pages, 9 through 12, and overall we saw an 8.1% increase as compared to 2022. There were some notable increases in theft reports, which can include everything from theft of fuel to shoplifting to employee theft, which just kind of depends on how it's categorized. There are also increases in DWIs and juvenile activity reports, and there's some slight increases in assaults and fraud reports. There were decreases in burglaries, drug offenses, disorderly type calls, suspicious activity, also domestic situations, alarms, and agency assist went down. Officers also responded to 243 calls for service at our St. Francis schools. In addition, officers performed 2,210 traffic stops, issued 513 total citations, with 421 of those being traffic related. And the officer response time for both high priority and low priority calls remains in that 5 to 6 minute range. Minnesota TZD, or Towards Zero Deaths Initiative, is listed on page 15 in the report, lists some statewide statistics, as well as some enforcement numbers for Anoka County and St. Francis respectively. And as you can see, fortunately, traffic fatalities did drop in 2023 compared to 2022, but DWI did increase, so that continues to be a major problem. Also, a big part of what our officers do is training. In 2022 was really no different, when you combine total of 526 training hours over the course of the year. We gained 2 new instructors, both in areas of use of force and firearms. Officer Hedges completed a 40-hour training course to become a Department of Use of Force instructor, and Officer Park completed a 40-hour course to become a Department of Firearms instructor. And we also had Officer Chan Pena become our first St. Francis officer to join the North Command Mobile Field Force, which just got up and running here in the last few months. We welcomed Officer Bolte in February of 2023, and he has just successfully completed his year-long probationary period, and he has definitely been a great addition to this department. Our UAV program is highlighted. I promise I'm almost done. The UAV program is highlighted on page 16, along with our 4 operators. Officers Park, Valera, Zuris, and Hedges put in an extensive amount of training to become certified operators, which included passing an FAA licensing exam. Since implementation last summer, the UAV has been deployed 17 times for reasons including threat assessment and monitoring of large public events, emergency situations including a missing person, training and assistance to surrounding jurisdictions on a couple of occasions. The department also implemented a wellness program in 2023, which focuses both on physical and mental wellness of our officers and staff. And the focus of the remainder of the report is on additional highlights and services police department offers, along with numerous events held throughout the year that really could be done, obviously, without the time and extra effort put in by your amazing staff. So, as always, I'd like to thank the council for all of your continued support, and we look forward to every year.
Great report, I don't really have anything, just let your people know, thanks for what they're doing and. In light of, recent events, tell them to stay safe and, I appreciate everything that they're doing for our community.
Thank you, great report, and yes, please pass along our appreciation for all their hard work and dedication. Yes, we want them to stay safe. It's a tough job. We really do appreciate that.
You know, the report looks great. Sorry, it's one of those weeks, it's been a rough weekend for law enforcement. And I wanted to take some time to acknowledge that. You guys do an incredible job here at St. Francis and everywhere. So, my appreciation for that. I'm a little dumbfounded that there were 100 DUIs in St. Francis. That was a little mind-boggling there, but, keep up the great work and thank you for all you guys.
Great report, really appreciate the thoroughness. The drone, also greatly appreciate the Friday 5 that you put now on Facebook, that's fantastic. It should have been done long ago, and I hope you expand on it, or it's good information to have. It's the public, that's the meeting place, that's where everybody's seeing it, and it's a great idea, so keep up the good work there. And I agree, there's some interjections, I think I've seen a little bit of humor or innuendo in there, which helps too, so it keeps it light-minded, but it's real life stuff, so. And to Crystal's point, in the past, you said the DUIs were usually traffic, people coming through, not residents here, not tracking people leaving any establishments here and whatnot. Is it still the case where your people from other addresses, or is it balancing out?
It's a blend. I mean, we get a fair share of local people, but we also get a fair share of people that are making their way through here we get a few that think they're somewhere else and they really don't know where they're at, which is really scary, honestly. But we do get a bunch of people that are visiting friends and they're from way out of town. They're just making their way back, whether it's an hour drive or 2 hour drive or whatever. So I would say it's a fair blend. I mean, fortunately, I would probably say it's less of our local residents than out of towners, but I would have to really pinpoint down the numbers to get that clear.
All right, also the school calls, 243, how's that compared to last year and years prior when there was actually a resource officer?
Oh, if I have that number or not.
It didn't be to catch off guard.
That's a good point.
Yeah, last year in here, but not,
Yeah, our last year went there.
not with the resource officer then.
That's okay, I can catch up with you later on that.
Okay,
Chief.
sure.
The question then I had before that even came out was, the legislation that they're talking about again, what is the police union involved, or you got people lobbying on behalf of the police officers about what they wanna, oops, we might have made a mistake, the other team is saying, no, we didn't make a mistake, but we need to tweak it, and
What's the resource officer?
yes, Aaron.
The last I've heard that language is being addressed. The last I heard, there were still some concerns on behalf of the Chiefs Association members.
Rightfully so.
I think it will get sorted out. I think it's gonna take a little more time than people have wanted to. I think people are hoping to get their SROs back in their school sooner than later, but the longer they juggle it back and forth down there, it's gonna take longer for us to, jurisdictions get options back in the schools. But I do think, I know it's being worked on. I'm pretty confident they're gonna come to a consensus somewhere in the middle, and hopefully it's enough to keep, officers, safely and productively doing their jobs and they're back in schools without too much concern. So we'll see where that goes, but it is being worked on.
Okay, did I hear Blur read something, is there supposed to be maybe some funding coming out of thin air that they were actually make every school have something, as you see some of these school instances pop up, which is tragically so.
I've heard tidbits of that, but I don't know how accurate it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right. And then the last thing, has the drone been in use? Have you had guys been flying anything around? Has it been useful for you since you got it? you kind of figured we've got the atmosphere and the need for it, hasn't been working.
I think it's worked really well. Obviously, we don't have stuff every day, every night,
Right,
but we have located at least one missing person on the river bank. with it.
that's worth a factor too.
Yeah, and you know, we've only had it in use for about 8 months now, so, we've had it in use, obviously during our large events, we've had it, like I mentioned in the report, we've assisted Isani County at least once on it, we've assisted the sheriff's office here in Elk County, I believe it's twice. So people are being made aware that we do have a tool,
Good,
you know, and out in this area at night or when there's less resources, less officers on, it's nice to, you know, share those tools amongst jurisdictions if we have them. So it's been useful. We've had it up a number of times where we haven't located what we're looking for, but that's, you know, that's part of it. But like I said, we have located at least one missing person with it. So as you mentioned, I would say that it's money well spent, so.
good. It sounds like very resourceful, so. Well, I admire you and I admire your team, thank you.
Great report as usual. Again, thank all the officers from all of us, for everything you guys do. Where are we as far as, because I know you're looking at the canine stuff too, so I was just curious kind of where you're at with that.
Right now, we're focusing on getting back to full staff. We will get to that. We will get to addressing that a little more this year. I can't guarantee it's gonna happen this year. Like I said, our focus is getting our staff up to speed, our officers back on the street, you know, the full staff. Giving our trainers a breather, and then we'll focus on the next large project. This project is gonna take all of us to it, so, you know, the body camera project was big, the UAV project was big. This is a big one as well, so it's gonna take time, it's gonna take effort, it's gonna take all our input on it, we wanna do it right, so it's gonna be full time. But I would definitely say 2025 isn't out of the question, for having something like that up and running, so.
Okay. And, do we have a date yet or an idea of the Citizens Academy this year?
Yes. That's another one, maybe I should have wrote down,
So-
if I can get back, yeah, on that, I believe it is in April.
Usually it is.
April, I don't know the exact date, it's about, I can certainly get that.
Well, just to promote it, I think, you know, whatever we can do, an awesome job on Facebook, like Kevin said as well. Again, thank you guys for everything. Appreciate the emails and updates that you guys send us. And all the community programs that you get. Thank you. That will move on to council member reports. Kevin, we'll stick with you.
I have nothing to report, sir, since our last meeting.
Crystal?
I attended the elected leaders training, held by, League of Minnesota Cities. It was a 2-day event, very informational. I learned a lot going through that, made some good connections there. Got to ask some questions that as a new council person, I, you know, was curious about, and it was nice to see others were just as overwhelmed as I am at times. And then, other than that, the Living with Cops tonight popped in over there to offer some help and just watching. Great event. It was fun.
I don't have anything to report. I do want to pop back on the SRO stuff, and I'm just intrigued by, and I know with the amount of calls that we go to the school, are we seeing more immediate in custody? I'll say, I won't say arrest, but in custodies that would have been a little bit more tamed and settled down when we had an SRO? Are we seeing a trend where those students are just further out of control and being detained a little more without an SRO versus
Yeah, I mean,
in building?
as far as overall numbers themselves, again, I'll get that figure. I know they did go up this year from last year, and they continue to kind of trend upwards, but as far as like the volatile situations, we've had a few of them even recently, that I am very confident that could have been productive. With an SRO, in the school, to kind of diffuse that before it was allowed to fester and get out of control for 10 minutes before we got there. So, yeah, there was, at least one occasion this year, that one of our officers even got injured, you know, fighting with a kid. that, claimed he had a weapon and all those other things that just was allowed to get out of control before we got there that again, and that's not, there's some other situations that are just, I'm not saying it's any fault of anybody in the school, I'm just saying that at the time that it's allowed to kind of, the student is allowed to get more aggressive and whatever the school policies are, with being hands off and everything else. I think that if you had an officer in the school especially if they had a relationship with the student, maybe even, to have a rapport with somebody like that and then be able to prevent that from, getting to where it is sometimes before we get there. So I can't say that's for all situations, I can say I'm pretty confident that we could prevent a few when, if we were there, so. And I can't say that, we've had some situations where we've had an SRO in there too, that we've had to go hands on with some kids or whatever the case may be, but. Case by case basis, these last few, that we had, especially when our officer was injured, I'm pretty sure that we could have prevented all.
And I just wanna say that, if any of the school officials watch this or not. It's all about safety for our children, and if you have an SRO in the building and they have a better rapport. I think you tend to get less amped up on both sides, so I'm hoping that that's a good push for, when everything gets settled in. Maybe we can get an SRO back in our schools for the safety of our children. Thanks.
I don't have anything to report.
For my report, I did attend one with cops tonight as well. Spoke with staff about a number of things, I guess, throughout the week here and there. Nothing major to report there, but keep in touch with our staff. I did want to ask the council how they felt about the group ACID that was here. They passed out those flyers or whatever for the voting deal. I guess kind of where we're at with that is they're reaching out to try to get a work session with us. How does before I say, yeah, let's do this or let's not do that. I mentioned it to Kevin previously, and then I was just out there with the local meeting stuff. So then you want to know, like, where do we stand with that? Do we want to have them come out, to get a consensus from the council on how we feel about that? That's something we're willing to explore further. I know other cities have done it. You could also maybe view theirs online. Now we have it online. They had it during some of their meetings. I intended to watch it. I had not watched it yet, but now that I was actually hoping to make it down there for their presentation, but I did not. So where do we stand with that, Kevin?
I guess I deferred, when the gentleman talked to me, I deferred to Kate. With your last year for a lot of the filtering of what's good, bad, and indifferent, and I would respect that greatly. So I guess I would defer, as I listened to him, he had a bad connection, but, again, we have a pastor come in here and talk to us about Christianity. What impact does that, it goes through us and it carries on to what?
Right.
These guys can come and talk to us about election fairness and integrity. It comes filtered to us, and then we can do what? We have Jenny who goes and spends hundreds of hours on this, when the time comes in the cycle, the vicious cycle. But that's what we're all about. That's why we're here. We're allowed to vote and express our freedom. I guess I want for Kate to say, again, what would it do for us? And then how do is it relative to the people that we're here serving?
So Mayor and Council, so when I was speaking with Joe about this earlier, I think the options were, we can either have him back at a council meeting or we can schedule a work session. There is some caution about what's being told. There's a lot of the process that Jenny does that a lot of people who are advocating for changes in the election system don't take the time to sit down and review. And much of what is done through the election process is actually very public. So one thing we talked about today is maybe making sure you guys are aware of the public testing and different pieces where you could come into City Hall and actually see these being done. The information they're providing is interesting. It would be something you could listen to. I don't know how much of a level the city has to make any changes. We are under Anoka County, which then sets their process through the state of Minnesota. If there was large inaccuracies, we could, you know, listen to the data and come back with some information after the fact. But to sit and debate that with them at a meeting, I think would be very difficult and probably very disruptive. So we could invite them back to do a short presentation, much like we did with the assessor, and have them say their piece, recorded in one of our meetings. Otherwise, we could have them come back and do a work session and just hear what they have to say and go from there too.
How do you feel about that?
Again, what power do we have? Again, they were, you know, Jenny reports to the county reports to the state. We're, you know, 5 bodies here that.
I don't think we have much power. I think what their goal is, and this is somewhat of an assumption, so if I'm wrong and they happen to view this, I apologize. But my guess is what their goal is to try to get, I don't think anybody's against free and fair elections, right? We want it all to be above board, we want it all to be accurate. I think what their goal is to get these northern cities to start with to try to advocate to the county, is my guess. I'm thinking they're trying to gather numbers for that. My thought process on it is, you know, it's, and I kind of get it from Feldman a little bit, is everything's always on the table, right? So we'll listen to you, we'll hear anything that you have to say, obviously, we'll go from there. I don't think we have any power. I think one of the things, one of the benefits that I see in listening to them is maybe educating them some more too on what they're talking about, and maybe educating us too.
Q&A.
I mean, that's kind of the only thing I see as far as asking each other questions. You know, I'm hearing different things. I think one of the things the gentleman brought up on the phone, and he had a bad connection with me too, was the sample size. I think is like a very small percentage of one of his arguments that he had. And I'm assuming he brought that or said something to you about that too. But I kind of deferred to Kate as well, because it's like, I don't want to waste everybody's time. We don't really have power to change anything, but is that something we want to take the time to listen to, whether it's a work session or whatever? Like you said, I think debate during an open meeting may not be great to have that back and forth, maybe work session better if we choose to do it. You know, I know, like I say, Oak Grove and Melvin were on board with it. They seem to like the presentation and feel that they were educated on, which is not a bad thing, but depending on what kind of information they're getting and or sharing with each other, you know, is there some back and forth where, you know, they're being told what they're saying isn't 100% accurate, or they're, you know, a little bit, you know, we're all misinformed at times, or we all feel like we know what we're talking about, and we find out we're not, right? We are human, those things happen. So that's the only benefit I see necessarily. But as far as power to change things, that's all at the county state level, I would say, probably.
Jenny still has to dot the i's and cross the t's though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's given to her is the way it's gotta be done.
Right.
In
the state law.
I hate to waste your time to ever come listen to this too, because then am I doing it, or, you know, maybe, you know, I don't know, are they supposed to create doubt in your mind that we're supposed to change?
I think their main goal too is to get, they also want to get away from any electronic systems, is one of the goals they have, but.
That's a big rocket move.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, contracts and whatnot with county and all that fun stuff too.
Well, I'd be willing.
That's, I think, something that he mentioned when I talked to him, but like I say, it's up to us, I guess, whether or not we choose to go forward. I could go either way. You know, hearing more information doesn't hurt, but we could also, again, go online to Nowlands website and watch the presentation they gave there, spend our own time doing it if we choose to. So there's that option as well. And I don't know how good the quality is.
Yeah.
But, or we could all do that and then decide we want to. I guess that's an option too, you know, or not do that.
I don't wanna waste any of our administrators' time, you know, they spend enough time outside of the regular workday anyway. I'd be willing to devote my own time to do a work session and give them a time limit and listen to it rather than hear somebody else's secondhand situation.
Right.
But again, we're a forum, if some of us don't wanna do it, and we get outvoted, then it's not gonna happen. So I'm good either way.
Crystal?
So, I struggle with this one. There were, you know, based on all accounts, there was no widespread voter fraud in Minnesota, or especially in St. Francis. We don't have the authority to change much of anything. We don't have the authority to get rid of the electronic voting things. I think that this organization, in my personal opinion, is trying to do is coming after the northern cities, the northern counties, to say to the bigger Hennepin, Duluth, look, all of these cities say that there's a problem. And I don't see it. I had read a statistic a while back, in my other hat that said there was only, I believe there was one prosecuted case of voter fraud in Minnesota. In the 2020 election. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. However, I understand that we are a consensus group, and if folks want to sit through the presentation, I will. But I just don't see that voter fraud is a problem in Minnesota, and I don't think that anything that they tell us or any presentation that they give is going to make any difference with the way our elections are done. I think Jenny and everyone who runs the elections here in St. Francis does a remarkable job at it. You know, they run a tight ship on it. They know what they're doing. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Right.
I'm all for listening to, a presentation, I think where they wanna go is major change, and I'm all about our little piece of the pie. If we have some discrepancies within our machine, within the number of residents that voted, if we have any inaccuracies, I would love for this council to do something with our votes. I don't know if we can do that or not, but that's what I'm looking at, is our inaccuracies, and then we can do something to change all that with them coming in and doing a presentation. We're not going to make big changes along the line. We're not changing in Oakland County because St. Francis said so. So in that respect, I don't think we're gonna give them, listen to them enough to say, hey, there needs to be a big change. Do I think that there's voter fraud? No. Do I agree with ID identification voting? Absolutely. But those things are major changes with the state and whatever, but I think if we as a city have any inaccuracies in our booths, in our precincts, then we have to take a look at that.
And that's what our good.
Right. But, Sarah?
I'm gonna echo a lot of what Crystal said, there's in our little area, there's not an issue. I think they would be better spend their time in the larger areas where that is actually more of an issue. I will sit through presentation if that's the rest of what council does, but
Doesn't sound like.
I'm saying to myself, for myself, I would rather not.
Right.
I would be against having them come back for a work session or even for council. I think if they need to talk to us individually, they can. But I know for myself, it's not gonna change my mind. Nothing they're gonna say is gonna change. I'm very confident in our election process, especially in St. Francis and in our state. So I don't see the need for it.
Well, I don't know, but I think we try to do what we can do here. But it sounds like the consensus is no, so.
There's
At
two
this time.
meetings open to the public. They're more than welcome to come to the meeting, open to the public and
Voice that.
voice their concerns.
They want that.
With the time limit, so they can't just.
Wow.
Or 45 minutes. Bring the clock right in.
You have a timer?
So we have that, I had something else to do, but now I lost it. I'll leave that important.
The whole block.
Okay, so we have a consensus on that, that's a no, I might look at the now and one just to watch it if I find time to do that. At that time, I guess, I believe that is all we have for this evening, so we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, Commissioner Mayor?
Motion by Councilmember Udvig, do we have a second? I'll second. Second by Councilmember Coward, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, 7:17.